Hello everyone, welcome and thank you all for being here. This is our final lecture. It's been the 27th annual Wilderness Lecture Series focused on Native peoples and conservation. We've had the opportunity to have many dynamic, inspiring Native leaders from around the country to talk about conservation from their own perspective. Tonight we have Larry Merculieff, and he is someone from Alaska. You'll have a fuller introduction from him a little bit later on. But he's going to be here to close our lecture series to help ground us and focus on the topics we've been exploring and what their implications are for us all. His talk tonight is titled The Real Human Being, Wisdom of Elders for Modern Times. So I'm just up here to give a few announcements and some many thank yous. The first needs to go to Jeffrey Ross. Jeffrey, can you raise your hand? He's back there. Jeffrey has offered a lot of leadership and vision for this series. He met Larry up in Alaska in the fall and told us that we should invite him to this series. He made initial contact with Larry, and so that's why we have him here tonight. Jeffrey is head of the local ACES, American Indian Society, and Science and Engineering Society. So thank you, Jeffrey. Need to also give thanks to several other people. Manuela Welloffman and the Montana Museum of Art and Culture have generously donated art for this series that have been on our poster this week, and for the series as a whole. The artwork is by Gloria Emerson, and the piece is titled Bird Woman in 1806. Other people who helped put this talk together include the students of Wilderness and Civilization, the University of Montana's Diversity Advisory Council, the EPSCoR program, and the College of Forestry and Conservation. We've had many other people help support this series, both in giving us ideas for speakers and providing funding. Kate Shanley has been instrumental with the Native American Studies Department, the Calvin B. Scott family, Phil Condon and the Environmental Studies Department, Rachel Smith and the Native American Natural Resources Program, and many others. Then also thank you to MCAT, the Missoula Area Access Community Television. Each week they've been filming this series free of charge to us as part of their Media Assistance Grant Program. So for people who aren't able to attend the series, it's broadcast to thousands of people around the Missoula Valley. So thank you to MCAT. Thank you also to KUFM for filming many of these talks. So because of the taping, you've heard every week, the doors are really loud, so if you need to leave early, please do so quietly. Larry's going to talk for about 50 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, and then we'll have time as usual for questions and some responses, and we'll try to finish up around 8:30. And finally, the final announcement is that the Wilderness Institute, that Lori, Ashley, and I are a part of, we are organizing volunteer monitoring trips this summer in 3 wilderness areas, the Rattlesnake, Gates of the Mountains, and Anaconda-Pindler wilderness areas. We'll be doing monitoring for weed invasions and recreational impacts. The trips are anywhere from 1 day to 5 days. We provide dinner and transportation. If you're interested in signing up for those, we have a sheet at the door there, or you can find more information on our website. Okay, on to our speaker. Tonight, I've asked Beth Ann Garamond to introduce our speaker. Beth Ann and several others were instrumental in starting a group called Students of Wilderness and Civilization. And they're students who were in the program last year who had the idea for this topic, for this series on Native peoples and conservation. They put on a benefit in February. They raised money, they raised awareness, and particularly wanted to support Larry's visit here tonight. And so Beth Ann is going to introduce Larry. They spent the day today. They hosted a lunch for him and took him up to the bison range. So Beth Ann, on behalf of the students of Wilderness and Civilization, thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I know there's a million things going on campus tonight, so it's great to have you with us. When I was asked to introduce Larry, I knew very little about him, and a little bit of research provided a great deal of enlightenment. A Google search will give you at least 575 results for Larry. So that'll tell you a little bit about the busyness in this man's life. In particular, an excerpt from an address that Larry gave to some Aleut elders was very interesting to me. Larry said to them, "I used to write my speeches, you know, when I left the university. They train you to write everything down. As commissioner, you have to write everything down for the public record. I stopped doing that when an old man, Howard Luke, and I were exchanging tape recordings with each other. He sent me this tape and said, 'Anybody that gets up in front of a crowd of people and has to read from a piece of paper has no business being up there.'" Well, Larry, I must apologize because here I am, and I felt compelled to write it down. Larry Merculieff is an Aleut, and he's a native born in the Merculieff Islands on a particular island called St. Paul in the Bering Sea. And he spoke this afternoon of this place being known as the home of the mother's brother, and said that he grew up deeply connected to this place, its systems, and its fellow inhabitants. At an early age, Larry had a gift for building relationships and has since developed this in professional, scientific, and spiritual realms. He has co-founded, directed, and organized several prominent environmental organizations which directly focus on the interface between environmental health, native well-being, cultural preservation, and people's reconnection with the spiritual realms of life and creation. And Larry spent some time with us, as Nikki mentioned this afternoon, and provided me with all kinds of wonderful things that I could say that would tell you a great many things about Larry, but myself personally, I'd love to hear Larry talk about them, and I just want to give you an understanding of Larry's compelling presence and his capacity as a messenger who's been directed by elders from South America and Alaska, from the Maori in New Zealand, from the African indigenous people and native peoples in Asia to communicate between these different people the importance of reinvigorating youth across the world and people in general in terms of recognizing a consciousness in their relationship with the world and with each other. And so I'd like you to just help me welcome Larry, and let's settle in and enjoy having him with us.
That's got to be the best introduction I've ever had. Thank you. That's really great. Ang kinga kakamna, ang kinga kasuda, ting unangan way, unangan asakta kuyach, amakancha asakta Larry Merculieff, ting kawalangan unangan way. Ang wan. What I said was, Ang wan in my language means hello, my other self. It's a very, very special kind of greeting that we always greet each other with. We say, Ang wan, hello, my other self. And I said I'm an Aleut, and my traditional name is Kuyach, and my English name is Larry Merculieff. There you go. And I come from the people of the sea line. We call them people of the sea line. My people have been out in the Bering Sea for about 10,000 years. We're still there. And I was given this name Kuyach when I was 4 years old. It was given to me by the last Aleut medicine man that was left alive. And he gave me his name, and it's given to one person in each lifetime. And basically it means extension. An extension from the great knowledge or the ancient knowledge into modern times, an extension from earth people, in this case Aleut, to the outside world. And so I was schooled in that way. Is there anyone who has ancestry to these sacred lands that are here tonight? May I have your permission to speak, please? Thank you. Part of the traditional way that our people have always had across Turtle Island, from Alaska all the way down to South America, is that the real human being, whenever they came into another sacred lands, that they always asked for permission. And these are sacred lands of, what, the Salish people, Kootenai. There's, 7 reservations here, I understand, and many tribes. Several tribes that were brought here, including Cheyenne, Blackfeet. I went out to feel the energy of this land, and the students were good enough to take me out to the bison range. And of course there were dozens and dozens and dozens of these incredible sacred beings that were there. And we saw bald eagle, we saw antelope, we saw different kinds of ducks. And the energy of this land, it's very, very, it's touched me more than most places I've been. And I've been in many places around the world. Something very, very special here. These are sacred lands indeed. And it probably carries some sacred messages. In my language we say tana'awa, the work of the land. Everything that I am, everything that I say, everything that I do, everything that I know, everything that I'm able to share with you today is the work of the land. And in all of the original peoples before the beginning of time, or we would say time immemorial, each area of Mother Earth has its own vibration. And it's from this vibration that the language is birthed. And so the elders teach from all these traditions, this is one of the biggest reasons why language is so important, because it is vibrationally one of the ways that we would connect with, in a very profound way, with the land from which we're rooted and where our ancestors were born. And we have genetic memory, and this genetic memory is there pretty latent and asleep until you go back to these sacred lands, you reconnect in a profound way, and something else gets activated. I was born on a magical, mystical island, St. Paul, in the Pribilofs, with, at that time when I was a child, it was 1.4 million fur seals, 2.5 million seabirds, 1,000 reindeer, several hundred foxes, and 500 Aleut people. Amazing. It's amazing. You can't imagine what it's like to wake up in the morning and hear the sound, the cacophony of sounds of seals, and then to go to bed at night to the sound of seabirds. I mean, that's absolutely spectacular. And I was sharing with the class this afternoon about how I was raised. Literally, I was raised by the entire village. I had to spend time every year, every week, every month with the elders, so they would take me out camping with them, and I'd listen to them for hours and hours, tell stories. And I would be with the women, and they would take me out berry picking with them, so that I would begin to learn and connect with the sacred feminine aspects of life. And of course, the men would take me out hunting and fishing with them, where I was schooled in a lot of ways about what it means to be an Aleut man. And and I had a freedom that very few people have had. I used this example in the class this afternoon. I grew up never being scolded, never being criticized, never being put down, always being affirmed by everybody all the time. How many of you have never been scolded? Raise your hand. A couple of native people up there. Yeah. That's an amazing way to grow up. And I was given a full range of freedom to go anywhere I wanted to go, day or night. I can walk into anybody's house, day or night, and I'd be welcomed like I was a member of the family. It's such an incredible way. And I could roam the island, by the time I was age 6, anywhere I wanted to go. The island is only 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. Very small. Imagine 1.4 million seals and 2.5 million seabirds, 1,000 reindeer and 500 alligators on an island 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. So I'd wake up in the morning before sunrise and walk out of town. Sometimes, frequently it would be 6 miles out, but sometimes I'd go 12 miles out at age 6 by myself, just to go under the bird cliffs, to be there when the birds would wake up, the seabirds, when the sun comes out. And I would be surrounded, imagine this, by tens of thousands of seabirds moving in every which direction at every level. And as far as the eye could see throughout the entire horizon, covered with tens of thousands of seabirds. Wow. And actually that was my first connection profoundly with what I would call the sacred connection to all of creation. And I began to learn what my elders and the teachers that I had in the entire village, they would never tell me things. They would never explain anything. So, this is this and that is that. I was treated not like a child, but like a being of intelligence, capable of utilizing my full intelligence to begin to understand what it is this creation is all about, with some guidance from the elders, but very minimal. At age 5, I had an acha, which is a very special connection between older and younger. And the connection is so strong that words are very minimal. When he took me under he taught me all about being Aleut, about hunting, about respect, about relationship, about being a man. From age 5 to age 13, he had me under his wing, and yet he literally may have said 200 words to me, with a very strong understanding that words are not only superfluous, but can actually, it comes from an ancient wisdom that we should not define everything, because the act of defining it circumscribes it and puts it into such a tiny hole from what its true nature is. And to try to grow up without definition of anything and to allow me the honor, the privilege to be treated as a real human being, to use my intelligence. And it was only later that I was able to put words to it. The intelligence is not in the head. It's part of the intelligence. But it's the human being, the entire human being, and all of our faculties that we are given, that if we are allowed to exercise them without definition, without constraint, but given as much freedom, you begin to understand that intelligence of human beings is far more deeper and higher than anyone could possibly imagine because of the way that we're schooled today. So those intelligence factors, being able to utilize all my senses, my eyes, my ears, my smell, my touch, my taste, my sense of things, my gut reaction, my intuition, and then even beyond that, something that connects me in such a way that I can literally be part of all of creation, so that creation is giving me information all the time. And I'm going to try to describe what that is, and I want to leave here imparting some stuff that maybe you might connect to rejoin the human beings, what we call the real human beings. Unangan means the people. Dene means the people. Inupya means the people or the real people. Yupik, Yupyak. All of these different words that we call ourselves resonate, vibrationally come from the land, but they all mean basically the same thing, the real human being. And the real human being, the characteristics of a real human being, it's what all the sages have been talking about. Being present, absolutely present in the moment. being fully aware without interference of thought, being in connection and in relationship. And so when our people would travel to these different parts of the world, we give our names using sign language and sound and our whole bearing, how our eyes look, how we connect energetically, the people would know, that's a real human being. It didn't matter what the language difference was. There was a different level of communication that went on. And so when I was age 5 then, my acha would take me out and I would sit, take me out hunting, and I would sit for hours and hours and hours and hours, just watching, just observing, and never given any instructions, never told what am I doing or what am I watching or how to handle a gun or anything like that. By age 7, my acha gave me my first rifle and shotgun. By age 11, my dad gave me the boat motor so that I can go out in the Bering Sea. And I didn't have to take a competency test because they knew. They could see from what I was doing and how I was conducting myself that I could understand at that point. By age 11, I could navigate in pea soup thick fog without the aid of any navigation instrument. I used to wonder how my people who would have 17-foot kayaks, 22 inches wide, travel down to the South Pacific, down to Southern California, over to Russia, up to Point Barrow. You know, they think Magellan had something. It's like, whoa, our people were traveling thousands of miles in these kayaks. And in the Bering Sea, there's no sun. We got 20 days of sunshine a year. And so we don't see the stars. It's overcast all the time. I used to wonder, how did they navigate? And by age 11, I got what it was. Because when I sat down in the hunting, watching, there was one thing that happened predominantly that started to, then I began to realize something from that. And that is when you sit down at age 5 as a child, quiet, not saying a word, observing everything for hours, pretty soon what happens is the waves, we're hunting on the shoreline, waiting for the sea lion to come by. And it's not the California sea lion, by the way, it's stellar sea lion. And the waves would have this rhythm to it. And the wind would have a rhythm to it. And the sounds of the animals would have a rhythm to it until it was easy to zone out. Completely zone out. You know how you drift off? You know, when you have some kind of rhythmic thing happening like that in nature. And I realized in watching the men that none of them drifted off. But yet, they weren't like trying to shake themselves and, keep themselves awake like this. They were just like this. And so I caught on to something. And that is, when I come from a place outside the mind and inside of my own awareness and simply become the watcher, watching the watcher, then I am totally there and totally present in the moment, nowhere else. And being present in this moment, the time just simply dissolves. Literally, the sages talk about that. Time dissolves. There is no discomfort in the body whatsoever. You're just there in this moment, perfect. Nothing in the past, nothing in the future. And I got that because when I was watching the birds at sunrise, I noticed how thousands of them would be flying, but they would never hit each other. I mean, tens of thousands in seeming chaos. But they never hit each other, and they were always totally alert. They're going like that. They're just there, right there, full of life. I can't describe to you what that full of life is. You have to experience it for yourself. But it was from that point I realized that what the elders always taught, that they take their life lessons from the animals, that they watch them, and they watch children. And that's how the profound cultures evolved, was from those two things. How? Well, the animals teach being present in the moment. The animals don't worry about yesterday. They don't worry about tomorrow. They don't worry about where they're going to get their next food thing. You know, they're just there. And I can't, you know, these animals have high degree of intelligence. You know, much to the surprise of scientists who are now beginning to study that maybe animals do have some intelligence. Animals have advanced intelligence, advanced awareness. And that's where we took our lesson from. We'd watch the animals, and they would teach us. They would also teach us some of the sounds that we use in our language. And, you know, I think about, so at age 11, when I was fully aware in my intelligence, that was never circumscribed, and I was present in the moment, and I was watching and observing and not in my head, I would connect in a different way than you would connect if you're just operating out of your mind. So by age 11, when I had that boat motor, I could feel every nuance of the ocean. I could read the clouds. I could read the wind. I could sense the energy of the water itself, the smell of the water, the tension in the water. All of these because all of my faculties were operating fully. And so I could feel this, and I could feel energy. And then at the same time, I could watch and observe when occasionally a flock of birds might come out of the fog and come right over my skiff. And I'd watch what kind of species there were, how far off the water that they would fly, roughly what time of day it was by the light that was on in the day, and then watch the same thing with the seals. Those combined with use of my senses, I could navigate accurately. Now by age 11, something else happened to me. I was by myself, and I shot a sea lion. And we're taught, there are many, many depths about, some people get uncomfortable about hunting. This is not a superfluous kind of thing that we do when we go hunting. There is an intimate connection between the hunter and the animal that we're hunting that I'll try to describe to you in some way. Part of it started with me when I shot that sea lion, and we're taught to use one shot right behind the ear. I knew of the instant of its death, not because I was so sure of my marksmanship, but because inexplicably an energy force, for lack of a better way to put it, rushed through my body. Instantaneously, there was this communication that occurred. This animal told me it was conscious, it had intelligence, and it was willfully giving itself to me and letting me know by rushing through my body, its spirit, its energy force, its life force came through me. And nobody ever told me about this. Like I said, we weren't told what to expect or anything. We were not given instruction. So, I ran up to my Acha and I said to my Acha, I explained what I experienced, and he just smiled and said, "Good." Just like that. That's it. In that singular expression, he affirmed what I was experiencing. That it is, in fact, a known experience amongst our people. That they know this intelligence and this consciousness and this connection between different living things, human and animal. Amazing. And by the time I was 11, we would hand jig out in the Bering Sea for halibut, hook, line, and sinker. I got to the point where I can feel the halibut before it came to the line, before it came to the hook. And then once it's hooked, I can tell you if it's hooked by the lip or the jaw or the side of the body. I can tell you whether or not it's male or female. I can tell you how much it's going to fight on its way up. All critical pieces of information coming from an awareness that was the basis for my people's survival for 10,000 years. That's, our people had an advanced civilization 6,000 years before the pyramids in Egypt were created. We had for that time, we practiced brain surgery, actually. And my people also had a word for billion before Europeans arrived. Why would any indigenous, subsistence-based, intimately connected to land people have a word for billion? There certainly weren't a billion seals. And visually, we can't see a billion stars. We can only see 6,000 at any one given time. Pretty interesting. Would give you some food for thought. I'll talk about that later. I won't answer it now. What the elders are concerned about today is the massive disconnection that all of us are engaged in through a collective consciousness in this planet. I'll be talking in terms that maybe some of you are not familiar with. I'll try to bridge the best I can. In traditional understanding, it is always known that some of the most powerful forces in creation are invisible. We can't see them. We know love exists, but we cannot see it physically, this love that we might carry. By the same token, when we immerse ourselves from a place of disconnection, our minds operate in such a way collectively to create this energy field around the entire planet. And it's an energy field of complete dysfunction. The elders are so worried about it now that they are sending out emissaries. I'm just a messenger. Okay? The Hopi and Maori asked me if I would be, the wisdom keepers asked me if I would be the messengers for them. The Stony people in the Morley Reserve, the Yupik elders, the Tarahumars from northwestern Mexico, the Zulus from South Africa, the Mapuche from Patagonia. They're all saying the same thing. And they're all saying the time is now. So they give us messengers permission to talk about the sacred and secret teachings because the time is now. And they're saying the decisions we make collectively and the kind of energy we generate collectively on this planet in the next few years will determine what's going to happen. It's, you've heard about native prophecies, but prophecies are not cast in stone. They are like signposts. If we go in this direction, this is what's going to happen. If we go in this direction, this is what's going to happen. And it's very, very accurate. It is the most accurate form of prophecy in the entire world. And it's not New Age stuff, although it's not to discount New Age. There are some things in New Age that are very powerful in helping people to awaken. But I'm talking about the Old Age stuff. There are stories amongst all these traditions about how humans, since the beginning of time, had swung like a pendulum back and forth between masculine imbalance and feminine imbalance. Back and forth, since the beginning of time. Now, you might wonder, what does that mean, beginning of time? The beginning of time, in the understanding of all the traditions that have kept this great knowledge intact, was a time when we lost connection with the present moment. When we started to have rage, remorse, guilt, sadness, fears, pulling us into the past, or fears projecting into the future, anywhere but now. And the elders understand how this has come about and what it's going to rot, what it will be wrought from it. And it's very predictable, actually. When you look at it, I'll try to characterize it for you. And this afternoon, someone was talking about their father in Vietnam. Who was that? Yes, you were talking about it. And she had a very good question about that. And I explained, and she was talking about, how the question was dealing with how people could be apathetic today in what is happening in the Middle East or other places of the world. And the elders understand this very well. What happened, well, for example, I took the example of Vietnam. Vets come back from Nam depressed, deeply depressed. Being in contact with other people was very painful. A lot of them actually literally took to the hills. And they took to addictive behaviors of all kinds, hard drugs being the most known about them. Suicide, and of course, very, very deep depression. They came back by the thousands that way, and they couldn't understand what was going on. But the doctors knew something was going on. There was something here that was a legacy from a war like Vietnam. And what they found out through their studies is that the vets did not want to remember, did not want to have a smell that reminded them of it, didn't want to think about, did not want to dream, did not want to have anything that would remind them of the horrors and the terror that they experienced in that war. And so the defensive strategy that they took on was separate. I'm not going to feel anymore. I'm going to deaden my feelings. I'm going to deaden all my senses so I don't feel anything anymore. Boom, separation. I immediately separate from my body as soon as I separate from my feelings and use strategies to escape the present moment, because that's what an addiction is. An addiction is nothing but a strategy to escape the present moment. That's all it is. Because being present in this moment is too painful to experience. Then I think about, World War I, World War II, Korea, the Gulf War, Civil War, Revolutionary War, Mexican-American War. Then we had over in Europe the Crusades. We had the witch hunts. 20 million women were killed in the Inquisition. That's not to mention the tens of millions that were tortured. And so there is probably no soul on this planet that has not suffered some kind of soul trauma in your ancestral lineage. And I think about my people, 80% wiped out in 50 years by Russian fur exploiters. And can you imagine living at a time when 8 out of 10 people that you know are killed, raped, tortured in front of you? Your children, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, the shamans, all of your religious teaching destroyed. All the shamans and their apprentices were killed as the first act of the Russians. We still have stories about those times. And one of the stories is, the women on one of the islands called Umnak Island knew, they had heard of what the Russians were doing by taking Aleut women and girls as concubines, as sex slaves. And so they gathered en masse, several hundred, and jumped off the cliff rather than be enslaved in this way. Another story is 2 Russians were betting how many Aleuts could a musket ball kill. line them up back to back, fire point blank, and the answer is 9. Another story where the Russians found out it would take us a year to build an ulukhtan, a kayak. And because those kayaks were our meat boats. They brought back the whales, the large animals that was large enough food supply to sustain an entire large community. And they went in, snuck in, and destroyed all the craft in Akutan, one village, or one island in the Aleutians. And everybody starved to death except for, the only reason we know this story is one old woman somehow survived. Okay, that's the legacy. The survivors had to have been people who did not want to feel anymore. The suffering was too huge. And a human tendency then is to stop this suffering the best way I can, shut off. And so then we have a legacy of spiritual sickness then. They become parents, they pass along their behaviors to their children, and all the way down the line until the legacy of spiritual sickness is with us here today. In every one of you. And so, is it any surprise then that the vets come back and they become parents and they have children that are more disconnected? The prophecies amongst the Hopi and Maori say that the first sign of the time of movement into the fifth world, or the world of the fifth hoop, is going to be when children kill their parents. That began in the 1980s. They have a lot of other signs too. But they understood that this separation from one's body will disconnect from themselves, and when you disconnect from the body, you just disconnect from Mother Earth. Our bodies are direct mirrors, duplicates of Mother Earth. We cannot reconnect with the planet until we reconnect with ourselves first. It is not possible, according to the elders. We cannot do it. So, what they say is that we must struggle to reconnect with those things that have created pain and trauma to the soul so that we can recover our original aspects as human beings, our full intelligence. Without it, we're lost. And the prophecies talk that we are now at the fork in the road, and the Hopi prophecies talk about one road being spiritual, one road being materialistic and technological. But all the traditions have different ways to express the same thing, I'm finding out. That this particular time, the Dene, the Navajo, called this the fifth world, movement into the fifth world, this time that we're moving into. The Hopi called this the movement in the world of the fifth hoop. The Mayans call it the shift of the ages, or the time of no time. And the Tibetans call it the shift of the ages. All talking about these times. And these times are prophetic times. These are truly prophetic times. It's not Chicken Little with the sky is falling. We've heard doomsday stuff all the time. But in these prophecies, they're very clear about the indicators of where we are at with regard to these particular prophecies, which has been garnered from before the beginning of time. Now remember, time was invented when we became conscious of past and future, and where we spent all of our time in that area rather than here now, in this infinite moment, right now. And before the beginning of time, there was the great knowledge, and there was the original language of one, where plants, animals, there was no distinction in communication. It can happen between human beings and animals, plants, insects, water. And it's not a romanticized notion. This actually existed and exists still today in some of these areas. I was telling the class this afternoon about how the Mapuche people had sent an emissary up to Alaska to ask to invite an elder down, or 2 elders down, and I'm the coordinator for the Bering Sea Council of Elders. It's composed of some of the most revered elders in 7 regions of Alaska. We call them wisdom keepers of the North. And they decided that I should go. And later on, I think I understood why. But there was no way to communicate that to the Mapuche people because they didn't have any communication. They didn't have telephones. They live out in the desert, eking out a very bare existence living out in the desert. And so, but when I got down there, the elder in training who greeted me, I was trying to explain to him through 2 interpreters, Spanish and English, and Mapuche, why it was me that came. He said, not necessary. We already know. So how you know? They said, the elders told us. How'd the elders know? The sky and the earth told them. That's the original language. It's the original language of deep, deep connection. And this was how, between 4,000 and 6,000 years ago, the last swing of the pendulum, that all the world's spiritual leaders understood that there was going to come a time when everything feminine was going to be smashed. All the sacred teachings, feminine-based cultures, Aboriginal, indigenous peoples, First Peoples, women, goddess cultures, all of these, and Mother Earth. All these feminine things were going to be raped, plundered, exploited, destroyed, smashed. So through this original language of one, these spiritual leaders communicated, and we call that the internet, not the internet. That internet, they were pondering this question. What do we do with the sacred and secret teachings? We want to make sure that they're not lost, but yet during this time it's all going to be destroyed unless we figure out how to hide it. And so they deliberated on it and they figured out how to do it. Ingenious ways they did it. One of the biggest ways that they did it is that around the world, the spiritual leaders who were carrying these traditions collectively agreed that each cultural group, each racial group, each geographic group was going to forget intentionally a piece of the great knowledge. But not everyone will forget the same piece. Whoa. So what happened was, if I can use a metaphor, is they take this beautiful picture and cut it up into tiny pieces and spread them all over the place, like pieces of a puzzle. Knowing that there would come a time when people would begin to wake up again, open up their hearts, and I am going to share my teaching with you. And so, spiritual leaders around the world have been gathering quietly, sharing their pieces. So eventually the sacred and secret teachings will become whole again for this particular time that we are in. The Hopis say that Mother Earth is going through great shaking. She's waking up from very deep sleep, and the manifestations of that are going to be cataclysmic physical events on the planet. The Mayan priests and priestesses gathered 4 or 5 months ago now to compare today's events to their prophecies. And the prophecies across the world talk about how each of the prior 3 worlds, we're in the 4th world now according to this epistemology, how the prior 3 worlds were destroyed. And it comes from the 4 sacred elements, earth, wind, fire, water. And in this particular movement, from the 4th to the 5th world, the prophecies say that initially we will begin to experience huge environmental events that will be very destructive from each one of the elements. And if we don't correct ourselves, what will happen in a very short time, in the next 5 years, will be a combination of all 4 working together. At the same magnitude of the individuals, but synergistically combining together to create a greater effect. So the Mayan priests and priestesses said, yes, okay, the Indonesian tsunami, water. The Pakistani earthquake, air. Katrina, Wilma, that was air. So we had water, air, earth. They said the next one will happen the next 18 months. We'll check this out, see how accurate the prophecies are. That's going to be fire. And the fire one is going to be in the form of extreme volcanic activity at the same scale as the prior three. So can you imagine a tsunami level effect of the Indonesian tsunami in the form of volcanoes popping up all over the place? They said that the sky might blacken for the next 6 months, or for 6 months afterwards. And that the four-legged creatures, many of them will die on the plains, and of course all the vegetation for a period of time. Okay? Could be pretty scary. But not as scary, I guess, as if when all four combine. And then the blue planet appears. They call it the blue planet. Or the blue star in some traditions. In South Africa, they call it the blue star. But what the elders are trying to say is that this is not a doomsday prophecy. There is time, if we can pay attention to what it means to restore ourselves as real human beings. Now, how did natives keep themselves, how did my ancestors keep themselves real human beings? Well, I told you some of it. But another big part of it has to do with reconnecting, being present in the moment, reconnecting with the feelings that you're trying to run away from. If you're depressed today, it's because you are covering up and holding down feelings that you don't want to come up. Or there's a rage underneath that. They're huge feelings. They seem to be huge when you go through them. But you're going to have to go through that path and re-access these feelings and do it in several different ways. And we are so lucky today that we have got so many different healing modalities coming from the four directions. You know, we've got acupuncture, acupressure, Reiki, we've got modern day medicine, we have meditation, we have all these different healing modalities. All were used by many traditions to keep themselves real human beings. Amongst native peoples, what we do is song, dance, chanting, rituals, rites of passage, grieving ceremonies, celebration ceremonies. One of the things that's always understood is that when I swallow my feeling, I anchor it physically within my body. And so, if the more that I do that, the stiffer I'm going to become. And I'll become stiffer, my voice is going to become monotone, my eyes become dead. Even my ability to turn my head, I'll get to the point where I turn my body. This happens when we anchor stagnant pools of negative energy inside of our bodies. And so traditionally, the real reason for cultural practices such as song and dance is to move energy. Move energy. And we combine that with vibration of drum. And we combine that with use of our voice, vibrating at different levels. There are different songs for different things, some places to access deep within ourselves. You know, I think about, for example, we naturally do some of this stuff. When you're sick, you moan. It is coming down from what in the Eastern tradition you call the root chakra. It's vibrating through your body, and it's a way to start moving energy out so that you can start to heal from that physical illness. Or when I watched a 2-year-old that the elders talk about, I mentioned, take lessons from the children. I watched a 2-year-old. I was at a conference with 2,000 people, and out in the middle walks a 2-year-old girl, buck naked. Oblivious, unself-conscious, totally natural, and totally there, right? And you look at the elders today, they got a twinkle in their eye, and they've got some kind of, lightness of being and innocence combined with wisdom. And they learn that from the child. Even for those of you who follow the Christian path, unless you are as the child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. That's the meaning of that passage. Unless you are like the child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. What that means is that the child, when I feel pain as a 2-year-old, I'm going to cry if I'm feeling pain. Right then and there. I'm happy, I'm going to be happy. I'm pissed off. I'll get out there and I'm going to do that. You let it go. So what we've done in cultures is to take that form and move it into something that's more practiced. So we'll have grieving ceremonies to grieve, to bring out the grief that's in all of us. And the elders understand it doesn't matter that you're grieving this event today. This event is a catalyst for all the grief in your body. Move it out. Cry. Give ourselves permission to be a real human being. So when you start moving this stuff, start limbering up, start using sound. I'll show you. Everybody's going to copy what I do. Okay? Humor me. Hey-yo, hey! Hey-yo, hey! Ooh, that's good. That's really good. Hey-yo, ho! Hey-yo, ho! Hey-yo, hey! Hey-yo, hey, ho! Hey-yo, hey, hey-yo, hey-yo! Hey-yo! Day-yo! Now you see how the energy picked up already? That's the power of movement and sound. You do it just for 15 seconds and already, boom, you already feel that energy come up. Can you imagine doing it for hours? And so, knowing that today it's not safe to do that in public. People think you're crazy, you're doing New Age this or that, or some kind of label on it that says it's not permissible to do this. Go in by yourself. For those of you who are familiar with rage work, what you do, you go and you beat the pillow to death. Get it out. Just get it out. So that's part of what it means to be a real human being, is you keep energy moving through your body that gets stuck from these things that are happening. So that when you begin to become present in the moment, access that place of pain within yourself that is very painful, really. These things will help you get through it. And staying grounded during that time is also going to be very important. And one of the ways we use grounding is breath. Now, the 4 sacred colors have 4 sacred gifts. The sacred red color has a gift of knowledge and understanding of stewardship and nurturing of Mother Earth. The sacred white color has the gift of knowledge and understanding and mastery over energy, fire, the rocket engine. The sacred black color has a gift of water, which is motion and movement and rhythm and harmony with the universe. Sacred yellow color has a gift of air, which is the mastery of use of breath. And in all traditions we have practices that uses these 4 sacred gifts. But as human consciousness awakens, these gifts coming from the 4 directions are going to reconnect and combine in a way that has not been seen since the beginning of time. So I hope I've you know, we could go on for a long, long time on this stuff. I want to leave some time for questions. But I hope I've imparted some things that might be of some use to you. And think about it when it comes to your children. Children are like sponges. They have no defense mechanisms. Understand that energy, even though it's invisible, is palpable and it's there. So that when I express anger in the presence of a child, even if it isn't directed at that child, the child, like a sponge, will absorb that energy of anger. Mothers who have children in their wombs, think about that too, because the emotions that you go through are going to be downloaded directly, like mainlining, into your fetus. And I guess the last two pieces I would share is that during this time, the prophecies say women are going to be restored to their place as original healers. They were and are the original healers. It was the women before the swing of the pendulum that used to apprentice the men in healing arts and medicine, shamanism, and all those kinds of things. And women are taking their place now. It is happening around the world. The Hopi gave me an example. In 1990, there were no women chiefs. In 1991, there were 117. And now there are over 140. And soon, we will see a time in the next few years when almost every tribe in North America is going to be run by a woman. And women are taking their place in institutions, in organizations, everywhere. But I caution the women that in order for you to do your job, to lead into this new time, to break the old paradigms, you're going to have to reconnect with your own sacred feminine. And most women have forgotten what that means because we don't have rites of passage anymore for women. But to do so, first start reconnecting with your body, and then you will reconnect just by virtue of doing that with this sacred space that's within you that is connected to the source of all creation, which is called the womb. Scientists think that physically, it's the physical, biological structure of the womb that actually creates the nurturing environment physically for procreation to occur. Not so. In all the traditions, it's understood that the womb is a sacred, energetic space. All things are birthed from women. So it is on the planet, so it is up above. So there's a cosmic womb, as above, so below. That is a direct divine connection. That is why women have always been considered very sacred, and it has been forgotten by many traditions. And it's also why women didn't have to go through the initiation rites that men have to go through in order to access spiritual things. So that's one piece. The last one is understand that if you function out of fear right now or from these stories, you will be contributing to the collective imbalance in the world. Because right now the world is being surrounded by this collective consciousness of fear. And it is going to intensify. There is going to be growing violence. There's going to be growing cataclysmic events. There's going to be things that throw you out or try to throw you out of your center. This center, which is present in the moment, that has no fear. Fear does not exist in that place. That if you get caught up in that whirlwind, you're lost. And women, as you go through and reconnect with who you are, do not forget the men. Because we're beginning to see a reverse pendulum swing again to feminine imbalance because men are starting to drop out. And men are not going through school like they used to. They're not succeeding, quote unquote, as they used to. They're supposedly having more learning difficulties, blah, 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 blah. When I go to meditation groups, 99% women. When I go to healing discussions, 99% women. This is actually quite refreshing to see a combination of men and women here that I see. Really good. Men, our role today as the new spiritual warrior is to protect the sacred space of women so they can do their work. And that means a lot of things. One, for example, I'm standing here talking about the sacred feminine. My women medicine teachers tell me a man has got to be up there first to broach that subject. Then women can come in. That's protecting the sacred space of women so they can do their work. Or I see an opportunity for a conference calling, and I'll think about a woman friend teacher and say, hey, why don't you get that? Or somebody starts to come down on women for doing their sacred work, and be there to speak the truth. Okay. Thank you very much. There is some kind of drumming going on. Yeah, that is good. Okay, 8:15, do we have any questions? Yes.
What do you believe is the role of formal education, whether it's the grade school level or the higher education with universities and colleges? What do you think is the role of that kind of education in staying connected?
Okay, thank you for answering that question. You know, the elders that I work with consider this the inside-out society or the reverse society because we reversed all the paradigms for living. And so, for example, the heart used to tell the mind what to do. Now the mind is telling the heart what to do. And you are schooled from the get-go by your parents and then kindergarten on up this linear system to function here. So that your mind is telling your heart what to do. That is one of the reasons that our world is in the kind of chaos it's in. Is because the source of true wisdom comes from here. From the heart into the mind. The mind then figures out how to execute what the heart is saying. And so the paradigm that you all have been living in, going to these linear construct schools that are admittedly patriarchal, masculine in structure, I tell you, the masculine structure is very subtle. I mean, we live in it every day so we can't see it, but it's like being in the Matrix, right? So here I am, standing up by a podium where all of you are looking towards me. That's a masculine construct for you to accept authority so that you don't have to think, I will think for you. And you are taught that from kindergarten on up through college. In the traditional way, everything is in a circle, not a line. And so whenever there's deliberations of any kind, it's always in a circle. And the reason for that is exactly that we are all sacred beings equal, no more, no less than each other, and therefore we must treat ourselves that way at every single level, and that I cannot and should not take your power. And when you start to accept authority outside of yourself, this inner authority is the connection to the spirit that lives in all things, we call a Roh, the Creator. Then you are giving your power away. So what is the role of education today? Is to keep you in your head, I'm sorry to say. But we have opportunities like this that thankfully for people like Nikki and all of the students and everybody else who pitched in to have something like this happen, that we have the opportunity then to actually look outside the box, even if it's just for a brief moment. I'm hoping that we don't go reverse because I'm starting to see universities become bastions of conservatism, where we no longer are allowed to critically think for ourselves. And I think it will change because of younger generations. I'm spending all my time talking with younger generations. But I know the older generations, they will know whether or not my words are true. So I don't have to worry about that. But here I am just like a finger pointing at the moon, as it's usually said. I'm just a finger pointing at the moon. I'm not the experience, and I'm not the moon. But I can point you in a direction. You can choose to take it or not. Yes?
I have a question about, you talked about your childhood growing up. Did you ever have an experience where you felt like you were lost or frightened?
Never. Never. I don't know how to explain that. I think it's called a deep trust in life, a deep trust in the process of life, a deep trust in my own intelligence that is connected to that life. And that's actually, by the way, how Native peoples, one of the things the elders are very concerned about is that because we're disconnected, we no longer have the information necessary to adapt to the changes that are coming. And the changes are going to be very profound. Global climate change is just one manifestation of it. It's going to intensify. And if you do not connect with yourself and connect with the earth, you will not be given the information. You can't access the information that you will need to know what to do and where to go. I think about the Indonesian tsunami. There was one whole village that was saved because the elders talked to the birds. You heard that story? Yeah. That's what I mean. They stayed connected. They got the information. Mother Earth will tell you what you need to do if you only have the ears to listen. Yes?
Are you an elder, and how does one qualify to become an elder?
Oh, yeah. Can I repeat the question? Am I an elder? And how do you qualify to be an elder? I love that question. You know, I was keynoting a speech, or keynoting an event honoring elders in Alaska, and all the tribes gathered. And I heard about this young boy. He's 5 years old. And I didn't see him in practice until we actually got there. But we were to meet outside because, you know, amongst the tribes didn't have much money. You couldn't rent a big thing to have 2,000 people come to. So it was outside, and there were really big black clouds. It was clear it was going to rain hard. And this 5-year-old boy takes a drum, starts drumming and singing this song, and we all watched as the clouds split in half across the entire sky and went in opposite direction. There was sunshine all day. The elders call that 5-year-old an elder. And he speaks 4 languages fluently. No one ever taught him. The elders are going to him to learn the old language. That's another one of the prophecies, that when children begin to speak with the wisdom of elders during this time. Am I an elder? The definition of an elder is somebody that doesn't call himself an elder. They have life wisdom, they have cultural wisdom, they are wisdom keepers, and they are acknowledged by the community to be an elder. But you will never hear anyone who is an elder say an elder. But I will always hear, like this 78-year-old man, he says, "That's my elder over there." He's like 80-year-old man, right? In terms that you don't qualify to be an elder, it's the people who decide, really, who an elder is. And it's not a function of age. It's a function of life wisdom and cultural wisdom.
You talked about prophecies and the fork in the road, one side to...
Materialism and spiritualism. Spiritual.
What did the prophecies say the path of spiritualism, what will happen?
There's going to be, to use a New Age term, there's going to be, well, there already is beginning, an increase in consciousness and awareness and becoming awake, being restored to a place of being a real human being. Being aware, not disconnected, understanding that duality is only an illusion, and that love and compassion and relationship and connection is going to be the way we live, which is pretty beautiful. Kind of like a definition of heaven.
Would you be willing to list a few references or books or whatever that speak to what you've spoken to tonight if you wanted to continue learning more about all this? Some of your favorite books or...
Well, that's the issue. I'm talking in terms that are bringing together pieces that really never have been brought together by themselves altogether. You can get pieces of it in different places. So, for example, you can go on the net and look at Hopi prophecies. Other people have put them on the net, not the Hopi people, but they try to stay close to the original language. It was pretty hard because when you take it from the Hopi language and translate it into English, there's a lot that's lost in the process. One of the best Western books I've read is Eckhart Tolle's The New Earth. And he takes a step beyond the power of now, which was his first book, and actually progresses the New Age consciousness to another step further. It's the first book I've seen that's actually done that. So that might be a place to start. And again, it's like a strand in the web. Once you go on one strand, it'll start connecting to the whole web. Yes?
In any of these stories and prophecies of the peoples that you've spoken with, do you come across prophecies of the tongue of the serpent? I know in my people's stories there is a Midgard serpent which begins to look an awful lot like a benzene ring.
A benzene ring? Yeah, I'm going to tell you that the depths and layers of all of the so-called folklore and stories that go in these different cultures that deal with spiritual issues, they're multidimensional. They go through all these spiritual stories, the true ones, will go through all four of the sacred aspects: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. And it will touch all four of those. And so, yeah, you can take just about any of these stories and you can make application to a lot of modern day things that are happening because of that. And there are many traditions that have so many stories about serpents. I mean, one of the stories, of course, is the serpent was understood to be, in some traditions, like in the Celtic tradition might be, for example, where it's life, death, and rebirth in a circle. And the snake eating itself is kind of like symbolic of that, which the parallel in the Native American way, of course, is the sacred circle, which is manifested by the drum or the four directions of the medicine wheel teachings. And it's all these traditional ways had a single source of information before the beginning of time. They're only reflected differently because of cultural traditions, but the underlying principles are the same. That's what I'm finding by traveling all over the world. And all paths leads to one center, all of them. Okay?
I'd like to speak to your statement about women as original healers.
Women as original healers.
I'm not sure I know how to put this question, so perhaps you can hear what I'm getting at. In Western thinking, we tend to refer to an aspect of human being that transcends time or space or individuality, I don't know what you call it, in terms of the soul. And for some reason or other, the statement about women as original healers ability to bring healing is not only to those who, at this point in time, are in female body, and that the capacity to be the original healers is present in every one of us, regardless of what that is. So would you address that?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Her question was about the fact that it, rather than the entire burden of being original healers being on women, given this incarnation, maybe you were a man in the past life or something, that it seems like that's inherently in all of us, and that's absolutely true. But we are at such a material age now that we identify with the physical. And so we use whatever portal of entry we can to create the connection, because people can relate to this connection of masculine and feminine in the form of a man and a woman. Now, it's absolutely true that we all have it inside of us. It's just asleep. It needs to be awakened. But the quickest access to awakening is through the physical right now, because we're physically experiencing stuff that are pretty heavy. And I want to tell you about the importance of the masculine and feminine in that tradition. For example, I'm going to share with you the original form of prayer that was used by indigenous peoples around the world. The original form of prayer is not like praying to a Santa Claus God. It's like, you know, I need healing for this, I need healing for that, would you give me this, would you give me that? Would you protect this, would you protect that? It's part of it. But the original form of prayer is understood through the power of intention, and when spirit and intent are in alignment, followed by a vision, all is taken care of. In other words, when I pray and I send the prayer out, it's a masculine thing because that's outward movement. Symbolically, metaphorically, movement outward is a masculine movement. Sending the prayer out. But the prayer I send out is, thank you for this healing. And your intention, you embody that understanding with profound trust that the prayer is answered already. So you don't need to ask. In fact, asking kind of like, it doesn't make the prayer as strong. So I'm embodying this. I trust creation. I trust the Creator. I'm sending the prayer out. Thank you, Creator, for this healing that has occurred. And then, that's the masculine. The feminine part is the receptive, is the receiving. If either of those are out of balance inside of you, because your father abused you, punished you, or disappeared, or your mother did something to you that smashed your feminine, those are our original models of masculine and feminine. We carry that throughout our entire lives. And so because of the way my father treated me, I won't trust men. Or because of the way the mother treated me, I won't trust women. Well, that's an external. It actually happens internally too. Psychically, your masculine or your feminine is going to be smashed and abused in the same way that you felt it from the outside from your parents. So you heal those. So to heal, if you don't, your ability to receive the answer to the prayer is hampered. So I'm going to do both. Send the prayer out, receive the prayer in, embody the answer through trust that it's already done. That is the original way. That is actually how shamans and medicine people create the kinds of things that they create. I watched a medicine man do a rain dance in a place where there was no rain for 9 years. And that's exactly how he prayed. And it rained. I was with the Mapuche and they did the same thing. It hadn't rained for years and years. And they did this, they call it the Choiki dance. It's a crazy legs ostrich dance. I mean, the dancers are literally like this. oops, they're going like this, all day long. Because the ostrich, now I turn it off, the ostrich does that dance just before it rains. And I kid you not, lightning and thunder miles away started coming to us, and raindrops, I had never seen raindrops this big. Answer to a prayer. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Okay. Okay, I know everybody's getting really tired. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much.